Concepts of the progressive curriculum theory include active learning through experiences, independent creative problem solving, social participation in a democratic life, developing goals through the evolution of child's understanding, and inquiry and critical reflection.
In progressive schools, our students play a vital role in helping to design the curriculum, formulate questions, as well as seek out and they create their answers as they think through possibilities and evaluate how successful they, as well as their teachers, have been. Their active participation in every stage of the process is consistent with the overwhelming consensus of experts that learning is a matter of constructing ideas rather than passively absorbing information or practicing skills.
Problem solving. Progressive education aspires to meet every student as an individual and engage both intellectual as well as social intelligence. Creative and manual arts gained importance in the curriculum and children were encouraged towards experiential learning and independent, critical thinking.
Progressive education established environments where civics and democracy were embedded into school life reflecting the larger society. Progressive educators pointed out the importance of diversity, multiculturalism, multiple intelligence, cooperative and collaborative learning and what has become known as a child-centered approach to teaching. In progressive circles, education came to represent community, equality, and the honoring of every student as an individual. Community. A sense of community and responsibility for others isn't confined to the classroom. Indeed, students are helped to locate themselves in wide-knit circles of care that extend beyond self, beyond friends, beyond their own ethnic group, and beyond their own country. Opportunities are offered not only to learn about, but also to put into action, a commitment to diversity and to improving the lives of others.
Child's own instincts will help develop the material that is presented to them. These instincts also form the basis of their knowledge with everything building upon it. This forms the basis of Dewey's assumption that one cannot learn without motivation. Point knowledge is a social condition, and it is important to help students construct their own learning, as stated. Hence it is impossible to prepare the child for any precise set of conditions. To prepare him for the future life means to give him command of himself. It means so to train him that he will have the full and ready use of all his capacities. Social intelligence. Creative and manual arts gained importance in the curriculum and children were encouraged towards experiential learning and independent critical thinking.
As the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead declared long ago, a nearly well-informed man is the most useless bore on God's earth. Facts and skills do matter, but only in a context and for a purpose. That's why progressive education tends to be organized around problems, projects, and questions rather than around lists of facts, skills, and separate disciplines. The teaching is typically interdisciplinary. The assessment rarely focuses on rote memorization, and excellence isn't confused with rigor. The point is not merely to challenge students after all. Harder is not necessarily better, but to invite them to think deeply about issues that matter and help them understand ideas from the inside out.
Here of the progressive theory and progressive education. We have here myself, Latori Fulton, and we will have Sherry and Ms. Candide. Dewey and his fellow educational progressives drew from the work of German philosopher Friedrich Froebel and Swiss educator Johann Pestalozzi. And basically what they were talking about was educating the whole child, and wherein learning moved beyond just subject matter but also really focused on ultimately the child and rested upon the needs and interests of the child, tending to both the pupil's head, the heart, as well as they believe for the real business of schooling. And they searched for an empirical and rational science of education that would incorporate these foundational principles. Now, as you see, we have here Ms. Sherry, and she'll be directing us towards Mr. Dewey, who in general, he was very important to the progressive movement. He was focused on the relationship between thinking and doing. He believed in his education philosophy could equip the child between problem-solving skills and which would require them to overcome obstacles between a given and direct desired set of circumstances. According to Dewey, education was not simply a means of the future, but insisted represented a full life unto itself. He was dissatisfied with schooling, the traditional forms of schooling, because it was very rote, and he really wanted his child to experience something different. So him and his wife established a school laboratory at the University of Chicago. That's another thing that you're going to hear is Chicago, the University of Chicago, in which they could elevate new approaches to teaching. This was assisted by Miss Ella Flagg, which you'll learn a little bit later. Thank you, Miss Candida. She's going to direct us towards Mr. Counts. And what he did was he wrote the Principles of Education with J. Crosby Chapman in the 1920s. Counts shared in the child-centered theme again, movement and progressive education. He wanted teachers to lead society instead of following society. The teachers were leaders and should be policymakers who could decide between conflicting purposes and values. Teachers should be concerned with school matters, but they also need to be concerned with controversial matters of economics, politics, and morality. He really believed that school was an agency involved in society's politics, economics, art, religion, and ethics. He believed American schools needed to identify with such progressive forces such as labor unions, farmers organizations, as well as minority groups. Here you can really hear that he really believed in democratic and getting involved in politics and the community. That was Mr. George Counts. And our next person that we're going to be focusing on will be Mr. Harold Rugg. He was a longtime professor of education at Teachers College in Columbia University. He was one of the best known educators during that era of progressive education in the United States. He produced the first series of school textbooks from the 1929s until 1940s. As you can see, I wonder where all this textbook money goes. Thanks, Mr. Harold Rugg, for that. But no, seriously, he did a great job. And he co-wrote his first major work, Child-Centered School. Child-centered, which is another thing same thing that we've been talking about. His work had an impact on progressive educators and remains an excellent explanation critique on this topic. It also was one of the first treatises on the two major emphases within the progressive education, child-centeredness, as well as social reconstruction. He wrote many papers, and just really to change society, that teachers can do it. And now we're going to go into William Kilpatrick. He developed a project method for early childhood education, which was a form of progressive education that organized curriculum and classroom activities around a subject central theme. He believed that the role of a teacher should be that of a guide, which goes way back from the authoritarian type of teacher, which, remember, as I said before, that's what Mr. Dewey wanted to get away from. So he definitely followed in line with Dewey. He opposed to an authoritarian figure as the teacher. He believed that teachers should be that of a guide. Children should direct their own learning according to their interests and should be allowed to explore their environment, experiencing their learning through the natural senses. Of course, that's not my method as of yet. I'm working on it, but that's what he believed in, really the student taking control of their learning. Mr. Bode was head of the Department of Principles and Practices of Education at Ohio State. He became a national prominent leader in the field of philosophy of education, and he was one who was recognized thinkers associated with progressive education. He had strong convictions in the need for democracy and the power of a proper education to enable people to think more clearly. He wanted people to think more clearly as they were involved in the democracy. He exhibited a sturdy faith in democracy, human intelligence, and the power of education. His belief in connection of things, these three things, is a legacy of a contemporary world, Mr. Boyd. And then we're going to go into Mr. L. Thompson Hopkins. Like John Dewey, Hobson saw curriculum as a dynamic interaction of school and society. School and society was what the purpose of curriculum is. An experience in nature as well as a democratic or democracy in education. So here we have the themes again of school and society, democracy, as well as the students' experience in nature, their experience. And he wrote Emerging Self in School Home. He believed that education is not a functioning of schooling alone, but also of an environment such as their home, their community, and depict the integration of school. He argues for the home as a major site for education to take place, leading to speculation about the need to study other societal venues in which educational takes place, which could include homes, families, non-school organizations, mass media, peer groups, vocations, avocations, as well as other things. So he believed in a very holistic, broad-based education. He believed in growing as moving through these three phases of expansion, differentiation, and finally integration. Just to go back on to him, he labeled these phases as a normal learning process. Let's go back to him, pull him back there you go. And he really viewed the integration of curriculum, subject matter, and informal personal knowledge are to be acquired through the inquiry that is expressed directly to build the self into a more diverse and integrated human being. Sorry about that. I'm going to continue on with Mr. Francis Parker. He's really known as the father of progressiveness. Parker came to Chicago in 1883. Key theme again, Chicago, as a principal of a normal school, Cook County normal school. Before becoming to Chicago, Parker had developed an approach to education that rejected rote learning. Back to that again, and it listed the natural curiosity of children in schooling process. Basically, Parker, which Dewey thought as the father of progressive education. And finally, yes, this is someone who is totally different than everybody else. She is a woman. She is not a delicate woman who her mother wanted her to be. Ella Flagg, was a prominent figure in the turn of the century. She was regarded as a prototype among educators for that area. Her life and career bespeak the extent to which she worked through the Chicago school system against factionalism and divisiveness towards a united democratic society.
Get betcha. Classroom must be student-centered. We want students to be independent, not totally dependent on teachers to problem solve and critical think. We must make it happen.
Thank you, Sarah Blaine, for talking about the quote on student-centered and independence. I'm Mitt Romney, and I approve this quote about a democratic classroom for progressivism. Students should be a part of a community. Community is an extension of the classroom. Places centered on class, disability, ethnicity, gender, race, and sexual orientation.
Sarah and Mitt, your viewpoint is refreshing. It is important we look at things from a child's perspective. Metacognition, critical reflection about content, engage in inquiry.
I am President Barack Obama. Dewey would not like subject matter learned without students problem solving, nor should we pressure them or create a stressful environment.
No matter what, we are a democracy, and progressive education is a metaphor for this country. Republicans and Democrats come together to embrace a change that is student-centered.
So tell me what you have learned about a progressive classroom, Latori.
Well, I must say I retract my flop statement that it is exactly what I want a classroom to look like, that I need students to engage, group discussion, peer sharing, reflect, and evaluate.
Well, I am slowly getting you to open up your systematic head.
I thought about having students engage in a writing prompt. They can name one environmental issue they know and explain everything they know about it.
Wow, you're allowing students to guide their learning.
Also, in a group discussion, they can use a QR code to choose one environmental factor that they think is the biggest issue. Within their group, they research how to cure it. Within the group discussion, they can discuss who and what are the biggest contributors to the issue and decide on what would happen if it continues. They can develop a solution.
You're really creating a student-centered classroom. Also, they are thinking about the community.
Additionally, have them peer share. Create a presentation for the local city council and community and share their findings and ideas. They should answer questions from audience.
It appears that you have made them part of the democratic society. Without it being an add-on, they are concerned society issues, making them members of the broader community.
Candid and Sherry both emphasize that they reflect and evaluate. They can keep a reflective journal and entries daily. They should make connections between what they thought and what they learned. Sherry was excited to have students reflect. They can create new questions, write about group dynamics, and write views on lesson and their lives.
Sounds like you all have the progressive spirit.
Candid emphasized the need to have them evaluate on an ongoing basis. Some say Marzana would be proud that they should add aspects of their project to their electronic portfolio and they should include a narrative of what they learned.
Latori, I think we have made you a progressive.
Well, if they engage, group discuss, peer share, reflect, and evaluate, then I want you to sign me up.